Hey guys, Tim McCamus back in the shop for an extended version of our fabricating series. We've touched bases on things that you're going to do to get started. We went through some tools and we went through a lot of different procedures, and we've also talked about welder setup. We're going to get into a little bit of tacking and some of the process to get past after you've got the welder set up. One of the things that you need to be really aware of is your tungsten. So we had another video and we talked about tungsten. We've talked about it in a couple of them, different styles and types, and based on the welder you're using, what model of tungsten you use. So this piece is a piece of 2% thoriated. You can actually see that red band on the end there, which will come out of a thoriated tungsten holder. So remember we talked about some thoriated tungsten, and then some serrated, and then some hybrid. So I'm just going to use a Miller Synchrowave 250 this evening. So we're going to use this thoriated stuff, which is a good general purpose tungsten. One of the things that guys kind of miss on is the tungsten quality and the tungsten sharpening. Tungsten quality is something that you need to make sure that you're buying a good quality piece on. You don't want to buy it just because it's cheap, because this is your connection to the weld arc, to the material. So if you buy cheap quality tungsten, you're going to get a crappy weld. So one of the things that we want to talk about is how to sharpen this thing. So keeping a clean tungsten is very important. And if you weld a lot, you're going to dip the tungsten. You're going to get some splatter on it. Once it gets dirty, you just need to stop. I mean, even if you're close to finishing a weld, you just need to stop and clean the tungsten and resharpen it, because contamination on the tungsten is just an absolute worst way you can do to make a nice quality weld. So it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, if you're out of position or if you're in a tight area or something, or you're just go in with your rod too fast and you touch it to the tungsten and you get a little wad of welding rod, or you get some puddle on it, it's done. Just stop. And what our guys like to do is they'll sharpen up like 10 or 15 pieces and keep it beside them when they're welding, so when they get a piece that's dirty, so number one, if they contaminate it, it's hot. I mean, you're just finishing welding, so if you try to grab it out of there, it's going to be hot and it's going to be hard to hold, even if you've got gloves on. So what they'll do is they'll just take it in, this holder here, and if you loosen the collet holder, and you shake it a little bit, a lot of times it'll fall out. Of course, this one's not going to do that now, but once it's hot, it'll just slide out of there and hit the table. Then you can grab a sharp piece, throw it back up in there, and you're good to go. Now, as far as sharpening this, you can see it's got a point on it. So it's sharpened to a point, and there's no contamination behind it, because sometimes you'll get a little bit of weld splatter up on the tungsten itself. But this has got a nice smooth point, but it's not sharpened to a point. I knocked the end of it off, and it's kind of hard to tell, but after I got it the angle that I wanted, I took it and knocked the flat off of it. And this is something that I didn't really know for years and years. I actually had a guy that I just met not too long ago. His name's Fred. He's a really good welder, and he's done lots of research on tungsten, but he was showing me that that if you knock that point off of there, you'll get a lot more stable arc on your work. And it really does make a difference, because so the way he explained it is that your arc is coming down through the tungsten, and you're getting a lot of your energy up through your work, and you're making that connection here. So that that weld arc, when it travels down this point, if it's a really sharp point, like where you can stick it in your finger like a needle point, the arc gets to the end and it crosses. Okay, so it gives you a wider arc work area. Okay, but if you just take and knock that point off of there and put you just a little flat on there, that arc will follow down there and it'll come off that edge of that flat, and it'll stay straight. So you'll get a lot more narrow beam and you get a lot more control over the weld. So actually it was something that was never explained to me, but it works really well, and it makes sense once you think about it, why it works like that. So once you get the point on it, and you can see about how much tape I've got in that, then just knock that little flat on the end, and you'll notice that you'll get a nice condensed arc beam on the work. So kind of a little tip there to help you out. But so to kind of recap this, good quality tungsten, make sure it's clean, make sure it's sharp, knock the flat off of it, sharpen up 10, 15 pieces of it and have them ready to go, so that even if it doesn't fall out of there and you got your welding gloves on, you can just grab it by the point, knock it down, and pick you up another piece and throw that in there and roll on with it. And you'll see too, you might want to look at this. This is kind of a unique cup that we use, because I'm going to be using that on this this torch head tonight. But this has got like a filter type. It's called a gas shield lens, and what it does is it creates a lot larger cone for the argon to cover the weld in, to shield that weld. So this thing it's got a couple benefits. When you're welding, because you've got such a large argon coverage, you can pull the tungsten out a little farther, and you can get tight into some corners, like down in here. See, you can pull that tungsten out a lot farther to get down in there, but you'll still get good coverage. And then as you come up around here, you can roll that back and pull that torch head back. It also keeps argon trailing on the weld too, so that it cools it down properly. So as I'm coming around here and I start turning this up, I've got a lot larger argon cloud over the weld to let it cool down properly. So my guys all love these things. We got them on all the welders here, and they really work well. And these are kind of these are like a ceramic type material. We were using the Pyrex cups for a while, which is kind of the start of these big cups. These guys were they were making them out of that clear Pyrex, which was kind of nice because you could see through the cup, so it didn't block you. One of the things you've got going on here is, you'll get a little bit of blockage from the cup because it's so large. But those things were just horrible if they're, because they're Pyrex. So when they're hot, if you just lay them down wrong or touch them to something, they break. So you can see this thing used to be white, but you can see that these guys have been using this a lot. These are pretty tough, and they're not nearly as expensive as the Pyrex cups, but they do provide excellent weld quality and great argon coverage over the weld. So something you might want to look into. These are made for all different torch heads. We use kind of a WP9. This is a Weldcraft WP9 torch head, which is small and easy to use and fits good in your hand. So whatever torch head you've got, you can get these larger cups for. But so that's kind of the heads up on the tungsten sharpening. So just again to kind of go back on what we said, make sure this is clean and sharp, and flatten that end, and keep it back out of that puddle. And if you do dab some rod or stick it in the puddle and get a little bit of junk on it, you'll notice immediately you'll start to see some brown, tan, funky colored stuff going on around the outside of the weld. It's kind of like a smoky color. And your arc will go from kind of a clear arc beam to kind of a greenish color because your tungsten is contaminated. So when you see that, just change that out, and your weld quality will be 1,000 times better.